Hello, friends. I'm Professor Filip Kovacevic, and this is the 15th edition of the Russian newspaper's Monitor. I hope you are doing well today. I would like to thank you for your positive comments and feedback. I'm very happy to hear that you appreciate my work. And thank you also for being a part of the Newsbud community. The best is yet to come this year. So let us begin our weekly roundup of the front page news in the major Russian newspapers. First today, I have a special treat for you. I will cover a newspaper I haven't covered before. The newspaper is called RBK, which is an acronym that stands for the Russian Business Consulting. This newspaper is a pro-Russian government daily business newspaper. There is also a TV channel under the same name. Let's look at the front page for the edition for January 10th, 2017. Here we find a big color photograph of Alexei Miller, the chairman of the board of the Russian natural gas giant Gazprom. In the photograph, Miller is placing a painted depiction of the Russian flag on the pipe of the Gazprom gas pipeline. The article headline states that Miller spoke of the breaking of the historical record for the Russian gas exports in 2016. The article reports Miller's statement made on January 9, 2017, that Gazprom set a new record in terms of its exports to Europe and Turkey in 2016. According to Miller, Gazprom exported 179.3 billion cubic meters of gas, which is 12.5% more than in 2015. He stated that this meant that there was an increased demand for the Russian gas outside Russia, which Gazprom was able to fulfill very successfully. Miller emphasized that Gazprom exported more gas at this time than at any other time in history, whether in the Soviet or the post-Soviet period. Since the beginning of 2017, Gazprom already broke the daily export record 3 times. The latest was on Sunday, January 8th, and it totaled around 622 million cubic meters. According to the experts contacted by the newspaper, one of the reasons for these record sales is the low price of natural gas. The GL asset management analyst Sergei Vakhrameyev stated that the gas price, just like the oil price, to which the gas price is tied with a 6 to 9 months time lag, has been uncommonly low this year. This led to the Western European countries, especially Germany, to use the opportunity to fill up their reserves. In addition, according to Dmitry Alexandrov, the deputy director of the investment company Univer, the current very cold weather in Europe, as well as the uncertainty about the political stability in Ukraine, influenced the higher demand for the Russian gas. However, the asset management analyst Vakhrameyev cautioned that this trend might not last much longer because the oil price has recently risen to more than $50 per barrel, which is almost 50% higher than last year at this time. This will also make the Russian gas more expensive to the European customers. In that case, according to Vakhrameyev, they may decrease their demand, and as a result, Gazprom will be selling less gas to them. Nevertheless, according to the Gazprom chairman Miller, the company has increased its production of gas this year by 570 million cubic meters, which is not a whole lot, only about 0.14% of the total production. However, Miller stressed that if there is customer demand, Gazprom could increase its production by about 150 billion cubic meters, which is about 5%. In addition, Gazprom remains committed to stopping the gas transit through Ukraine and redirecting its capacities to the northern Russia and the Nord Stream pipeline number 2, which is being constructed at this time. According to Miller, this will radically change the gas supply network in the north of Europe and ensure more service reliability and lower prices to the Europeans. Miller left it unsaid, but this also means that Ukraine would suffer tremendous economic damage. The natural gas transit is definitely one of the key instruments that the Kremlin has been using to punish the geopolitically hostile government in Kiev. In my opinion, this article shows that the anti-Russian economic sanctions were not able to accomplish their intended purpose, which was to isolate Russia economically and bring about its economic collapse and political instability. The Europeans seem to be happy to purchase cheap Russian gas, no matter what the war party in Washington and Brussels wants to force them to do. The policies of Senator John McCain, State Department Assistant Secretary Victoria Nuland, the CIA Director John Brennan, and the NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg turned out to be total failures. And the sooner they exit political office, the better it will be for the political and economic well-being of the Europeans, the Americans, and the world at large. Now, let's go to Kommersant, which is the main liberal newspaper in Russia and is frequently critical of the Russian government, especially in terms of its economic policy. Let's look at the front page for the edition for January 11, 2017. In the lower left corner, there is an article on the upcoming negotiations on the resolution of the Syrian conflict in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, under the suggestive title, Astana cannot support the three, which refers to Russia, Turkey, and Iran. The subtitle claims that in the negotiations over Syria, Russia has placed its trust in the alliance with Turkey. The article reports that the last-minute preparations are being made for the Syrian conflict resolution negotiations scheduled to begin on January 23rd in Astana. It states that negotiations are taking place under the auspices of Russia, Turkey, and Iran, but that in this geopolitical triangle, Russia has made a close alliance with Turkey and not with Iran. According to the article, for the first time since the beginning of the war, Russia and Turkey are undertaking joint military operations against the Islamic State. The article states that the Russian calculus on the alliance with Turkey is the following: to take the geopolitical initiative from the West and also to limit the influence of Iran, which insists on the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad staying in power. The article reports that the Astana conference preparations, which is scheduled to have its second round in Geneva on February 9th, include intensive diplomatic activity of the Russian President Putin's special representative on the Middle East, Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov. Bogdanov met in Moscow with Kadri Jamil, who is one of the leaders of the Syrian opposition. Bogdanov and Jamil discussed the possibility of the Syrian opposition putting together a united political platform on the basis of the UN Security Resolution 2254. However, Jamil stated that at this time, the invitation to the conference was received only by the Syrian government and several opposition military groups, but not the representatives of the Syrian political opposition, which is something that has to be remedied for the success of the talks. He also supported the idea of a united platform, whereas at this time there are several opposition platforms. The article also reports that the Syrian president Assad stated his opinion about the negotiations during the meeting with a group of the French parliamentary deputies. Assad said that he was ready to negotiate with the representatives of 91 Syrian opposition groups, all except the Islamic State and the Jabhat an-Nusra. The similarly positive view was also expressed by the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The article quotes Erdogan as saying that the current ceasefire, even though it is sporadically being violated, opens up a great window of opportunity, and we hope that the crisis in Syria will find a political resolution soon. However, the article points out that there are several significant challenges to the success of the negotiations. The first has to do with the makeup of the opposition. The article emphasizes that Assad said that he was willing to negotiate with what he called genuine opposition, the opposition that has its roots in Syria, and not the Saudi, French, and British-sponsored opposition. However, according to the article, it was unclear who was in charge of deciding which opposition is genuine and which is not. Secondly, in his remarks, Assad criticized the Turkish President Erdogan, saying that he did not trust him because he was, quote, an Islamist. He also criticized the recent purges in Turkey and called them exaggerated and anti-democratic. Another challenge for the negotiations is the fighting that continues near Damascus, in the valley of Wadi Barada, where the Syrian government forces are fighting against the militants of Jabhat Fath al-Sham, formerly Jabhat an-Nusra. In his statement, Assad claimed that this was necessary because the militants threatened to cut off the water supply to Damascus. However, the Syrian opposition considers the fighting a breach of the ceasefire and has called on Russia and Turkey to, quote, restrain Assad. According to the article, the claims of Assad also obtained support from the Admiral Ali Shahmani, the secretary of the Iranian National Security Council, who is visiting Syria at this time. Shahmani accused the Syrian opposition of using the ceasefire to regroup and planned further attacks on the government troops and the Syrian civilians. The article hints that Shahmani was also not too pleased with the increasing Russian-Turkish collaboration. While it is true that Iran is very much against the presence of the Turkish troops in Syria, I think that Iran is also willing to cooperate with Turkey on the resolution of the Syrian conflict, with Russia playing the mediating role. And so, in this instance, I detect the covert influence of the newspaper's editorial policy, which is to seek to downplay the possibility of the wider Eurasian geopolitical reconciliation. The editorial policy of the Kommersant is pro-Western and economically neoliberal. The article's title, which implies the disagreements among Russia, Turkey, and Iran, is also geared in that direction. At the same time, however, the article notes that there are many signs of very close Turkish-Russian military cooperation in Syria. In this respect, A very significant recent example is a Turkish attack on the town of El Bab, taken over by the Islamic State. In this offensive, which is still ongoing, the Turkish military has been assisted by the Russian planes, even though, as a member of NATO, Turkey should have had the primary assistance of the US-led Syrian coalition. According to the article, there are conflicting accounts as to why this did not happen. The Turkish government claims that the US did not want to help, where the US officials state that the Turks never asked. Whatever the true version is, the result is the same. Turkey is drifting away from NATO and closer to the Russian-led military alliance called Collective Security Treaty Organization and the Russian-Chinese Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is a welcome geopolitical development. In my opinion, the hostile Western media campaign fueled by the CIA and the MI6 will bring Putin and Erdogan even closer together for the mutual benefit of their peoples and the idea of the Eurasian geopolitical and economic bloc. The Western imperialists, now colloquially referred to as globalists, will be left empty-handed and left to face the anger of their rapidly impoverishing populations. The election of populist leaders in the United States and Europe is the very visible and dramatic sign of that. And no efforts of various CNNs, BBCs, and Reuterses can push it under the carpet. Sorry guys, the European genie is out of the bottle. Now, let's move to the front page of Izvestia, the moderate pro-government newspaper, the edition for January 10, 2016. On the front page, there is an interview with Vitaly Churkin, the Russian representative in the Security Council of the United Nations. The title of the interview is the quote by Churkin, which says, "Some members of the Security Council are stirring up the conflict in Syria." The subtitle explains that in the interview, Churkin talked about the most important events for the UN diplomacy in the past year and the prospects of the Russian-advocated international coalition against terrorism. Churkin emphasized that last year was full of events, but stated that he thought that the balance sheet for Russia and the UN was positive. He noted that the UN Security Council unanimously approved the new UN chief, the veteran Portuguese diplomat Antonio Guterres. He also praised the 2030 UN agenda for global economic development. Churkin stated that Russia focused its UN activities on the protection of what he called historical memory and against the falsification of history. He stressed that the UN General Assembly, with the vast majority, voted in support of the Russian-sponsored resolution on combating neo-Nazism and the glorification of fascism. Churkin also claimed that Russia worked on the strengthening of international law and its various regulations. Churkin said that the most dynamic and intensive debate in the Security Council this year was about the situation in Syria. According to him, there are several countries, and here he obviously thought of the United States and Britain, but did not mention them, which are more interested in the overthrow of the Syrian government than in the peaceful resolution of the conflict. It was only at the end of 2016 that it was possible to pass two Security Council resolutions, 2328 and 2336, which opened the possibility of a sustainable ceasefire. Churkin emphasized that these resolutions were the result of joint Russian-Turkish efforts. He also noted that the outgoing US representative in the UN, Samantha Powell, proved increasingly unsuccessful in obtaining votes for the US initiatives in the Security Council. For instance, quite recently, for the US-sponsored resolution on the arms embargo for South Sudan, the US got only 7 votes, and 9 was required for the passage. Churkin said that he hoped that the new Trump administration would have a less confrontational approach than was the case with the Obama appointees. Churkin also recalled the Russian efforts to put together an international coalition for the fight against terrorism. Both the Russian President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov advocated this idea during the annual UN General Assembly meetings. However, according to Churkin, some countries seem reluctant to work with Russia, which is, in the long run, very damaging for global political stability. In my opinion, in this interview, Churkin demonstrated that he was a sophisticated practitioner of diplomatic style and rhetoric. He did not use any harsh words or mention the geopolitical opponents by name. Still, he was able to convey his dissatisfaction with the behavior of the Western powers. He emphasized that the aggressive style of the outgoing US ambassador in the UN backfired, and that the United States was losing allies in the Security Council. Overall, Churkin expressed the continued Russian commitment to the UN, which will probably disappoint those who think that Russia plans to alter the existing world order in a radical way. The Russians and the Chinese seem not to want to pull the plug on the UN as yet. We'll stay with Izvestia, the moderate pro-government newspaper, and we look at the front page of the edition for January 12, 2017. Here on the front page, there is a photo from January 11 press conference by the US President-elect Donald Trump. The title quotes his words from the conference. There is no reset button. We are either going to get along or we are not. The subtitle explains that the Russian politicians and experts gave their opinion on Trump's statements. The article reports that the President-elect Donald Trump gave his first press conference since getting elected, and that the conference lasted for about an hour. The article notes that the current thinking in Russia is that Trump found himself under a very strong pressure from the anti-Russian political forces. Still, however, he appears committed to correct the existing US policy toward Russia in the direction of more pragmatic and positive mutual relations. The article quotes Trump as saying that he hoped that Russia and the United States would get along, but that it is also possible that they won't. The article reports the reaction to Trump's press conference by Konstantin Kosachev, the chairman of the International Affairs Committee in the upper house of the Russian parliament, the Federation Council. Kosachev stated that it was obvious that Trump was under, quote, monstrous pressure by those who are against improvement in the relations between the US and Russia. According to Kosachev, Trump was buying time and did not make any definitive statements either for or against Russia. Kosachev thought that it was too early for that. In his opinion, while the relations between the countries might not become easier under Trump, there was a chance that they will be more pragmatic. Another Russian politician, Alexei Pushkov, who is a member of the Federation Council's Defense and Security Committee, agreed with Kosachev. He stated that in the current hysteria surrounding the alleged Russian meddling into the US election process, it was not possible for Trump to completely isolate himself from the pressure. According to Pushkov, Trump had to take into consideration the anti-Russian attitudes of many in the political and media sphere and could not make more positive comments about Russia. Pushkov recalled that during the election campaign, Trump stated that the US and Russia could cooperate in the fight against terrorism. However, it was too early to expect any concrete steps in that direction, especially because Trump did not yet enter the White House. According to Pushkov, the vast majority of Washington insiders and US political elite want to force Trump to continue Obama's policies toward Russia. However, Trump made it clear during the press conference that he would not follow in Obama's footsteps. The article also reports the commentary of Nikolai Zlobin, who is the head of the Center on Global Interests based in Washington, D.C. According to Zlobin, Trump did not take sides on the issue of the alleged Russian hackers for a long time. Now he made a pragmatic concession, and he admitted that it was most likely that the Russian hackers were involved in order to help along the Senate confirmation of his cabinet nominees. But Zlobin thought that the whole hacking issue was already becoming a thing of the past. By next summer, he expected serious positive changes in the US policy toward Russia. He stated that both Trump and Putin cherish the image of pragmatic politicians outside of rigid ideological schemes, and that therefore there was no reason not to expect them to get along for the benefit of both Americans and Russians. In my opinion, Zlobin may be too optimistic and underestimate the power of the anti-Russian lobby in the United States. As I have said on several occasions, I think that this lobby is funded by the anti-Putin, Russian, Ukrainian, and Central European billionaires based in the United States and in the UK, who have been able to buy the political allegiance of many members of the US Congress and the British Parliament, as well as of some key media personalities, journalists, columnists, and academics. This war network has no plans to give up. They will constantly create new scandals for Trump and will try to prevent all and every step in the direction of the US and Russia getting along. This will be an uphill and extremely difficult fight for Trump, considering that even his own Vice President, Mike Pence, is a member of this lobby. I expect neither the alleged Russian hacking scandal nor the former MI6 agent's bizarre private intelligence report to go away into the media dustbin anytime soon. In fact, I think that the pressure on Trump will be amplified. The rogue group of billionaire warmongers ultimately want to make him resign the presidency. Lastly today, let's look at the Russian semi-tabloid press, the newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda, the edition for November 11, 2017. On the right side of the front page, there is a photo of the outgoing US President Barack Obama. The article is entitled, How Komsomolskaya Pravda and Zhirinovsky Hacked the Brain of Obama. The subtitle explains that the Komsomolskaya Pravda article, in which the leader of the Russian pro-government Liberal Democratic Party, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, stated that he would, quote, drink champagne if Donald Trump won the election, made it into the declassified report on the alleged Russian hacking released jointly by the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. This article is also written by the same author who wrote the Zhirinovsky piece, Yelena Chinkova. She writes that she was in the US in September to cover the US presidential campaign for Komsomolskaya Pravda. Knowing that many people in Russia compare Zhirinovsky to Donald Trump based on their populist rhetoric, she bought a Donald Trump t-shirt for Zhirinovsky. On the occasion of giving the t-shirt to him, she also conducted an interview asking Zhirinovsky about various US candidates and the state of the US-Russian relations. It was then that Zhirinovsky stated that he would drink champagne if Donald Trump got elected. He also promised to send an entire box of champagne to the Komsomolskaya Pravda editorial staff. The article, which included this statement by Zhirinovsky, was published in the November 1st issue of the newspaper and evidently made it into the US intelligence report. What more proof do you need that at the CIA, just like we are doing here, they're also reading the Russian tabloids? In the end, Zhirinovsky, unlike many other politicians, proved true to his word and did send a box of champagne to the staff of the newspaper. When the US intelligence report was published, Chinkova contacted Zhirinovsky again and asked him what he thought about all of this. Zhirinovsky said that when he mentioned drinking champagne, he only stated his opinion, and that everybody had the right to analyze presidential candidates in any country. Zhirinovsky also noted that the United States not only analyzed the Russian presidential elections, but was actively involved on the ground in Russia to get Boris Yeltsin elected president in 1996. Zhirinovsky emphasized that this did not mean that the Russians did anything concerning the US presidential election, except expressing opinions as to what would be in the best national security interests of their country. However, he did say that he was delighted that at the CIA they believed that he had so much influence over the American voters. In my opinion, this article clearly seeks to ridicule the findings of the declassified report by the US intelligence community on the alleged Russian hacking. In fact, this report, in my opinion, is below professional standards for any intelligence agency, especially the segment on the RT TV channel, which any good political science university students could have written. And I'm sure that he or she would have used more recent sources than the fall of 2012. The releasing of this report was an extremely bad PR for the US intelligence community. Whoever is behind releasing it in this format and with such embarrassing, low-quality content deserves to be fired. However, there is no doubt in my mind that at the CIA and at their transatlantic friends MI6, they still have plenty of anti-Trump tricks up their sleeve, which they will put into motion very soon. Dear friends, this is all for today. Thank you for your time. Be cool and stay cool until the next edition of the Russian newspaper's Monitor.
If you found this video useful, share it. Newsbud presentations are only made possible by our viewers. Subscribe to newsbud.com today to become part of the Newsbud community, where soon you will find exclusive content only available to our subscribers.